Welcome to a Guthrie Family Podcast. I'm Danny.
And I'm Haley.
Do you ever tell your kids to go get your room clean or, hey, get your homework done, and for some reason they just can't get it done? Well, we're going to be discussing that today. You're listening to the Guthrie Family Podcast, a podcast where we encourage you in raising your kids and inspire you to grow in your relationships. We're your host. I'm Danny.
And I'm Haley. Join us as we love, encourage, and grow. Today we're going to talk about 7 problems with processing. So today we're going to be talking about children and their processing information, how they do this, and is it fast or slow. Now, this may seem like something that doesn't really apply to you, but we really fell into this because we were having problems with our children. We were having problems with saying, hey, boys, clean your room. You go up there 20 minutes later, nothing has been done. You have to step by step say, okay, put these trucks in this, put this here, put this here. You know, you're step by step having to tell them how to clean their rooms.
It's like the old saying, do I have to hold your hand for you to do everything?
And the answer is sometimes yes. So then also, you know, things like homework. So we have issues sometimes with homework with, again, kids wanting you to tell them how to do every little thing. You leave them with their homework, even kids that should be able to do it, and they're staring into space and all this. So all of this has to do with how they process information and how fast they process information. The reason we want to talk about this is because, number one, we want you to understand kind of where your child is coming from. So this has been a big struggle for us because we have various processing issues with our children. And so I've been reading several books. The book I've been reading is Bright Kids Who Can't Keep Up. And so the reason I got this is because we were having problems with our kids and their performance in school. And their performance at home. And so this goes for both our biological children and our adopted children. Our adopted children, some of them have their own issues as far as learning disabilities, ADHD, and this processing issue really does not have anything, it does have something to do with it, but it's indirectly linked. Right. So we're not addressing really how to handle ADHD, or learning disabilities. We're really just talking about processing information.
How they process things.
And how to help them. So you can have a better relationship with your kids.
It's so frustrating.
Yes.
When you go to tell your kids, hey, go clean your room, or whatever you go to tell them, go do this or go do that. Like the other day, I told one of my boys, hey, go upstairs, get your pajamas and get your towel and come back downstairs and take a bath down here. Well, 5-10 minutes later, I'm hollering upstairs like, hey, where are you? What are you doing? And they're like, I'm playing in my room. I'm like, why didn't you get your towel and your clothes? Oh, I forgot. And it's because of the way that they process things. Right. Or that I would look up the stairs and the towel would be laying on the stairs, like they got halfway through it, but then they didn't finish.
Right. So this basically helps you, and it also helps you to communicate with the child's teacher. So you may homeschool your children, and if you do, then this will help you as you teach your child. But otherwise, too, it helps you. This has come in very handy with helping my teachers. They'll call me and say, hey, I'm having problems with so-and-so doing this. And I'll say, well, this is how he processes information, and this is what has helped us process this information. So part of that, what's helped us too, is we did have to, of course, we've all had to homeschool our children last semester through March through June. And so we had to figure out some strategies that would work so that our children could learn and be effective in what we were teaching them. All right, so one of the problems that we have as far as processing is difficulty processing what they hear. So some kids, when you talk to them, what you tell them, they don't understand.
Or they just don't hear it the way that you're telling them.
Right. They hear it, but they're not listening, or they hear it and they don't
we've heard that
process
a lot.
it. Yeah, you didn't say that, or I didn't hear you say that, you know. So with some children, and one of ours in particular has an auditory processing issue. And so if you just say it, I mean, you might as well forget it. It's just not going to happen. So you almost have to say it multiple times and be real emphatic about it. So we'll say, I want you to go upstairs I want you to get your towel. I mean, I'm telling you have to make it really emphatic.
Right.
Because that way they're listening and you're giving them some visuals to think, okay, mama clapped every time.
Yeah.
and she wanted me to get my towel and my pajamas and my underwear. So, things like that.
Right, yeah.
So also, not only have problems following directions, but also learning the information that's given. So. And
this is a big problem we're having in school. Like, we're getting a call from the teachers, and they're trying to teach, they're trying to do a good job, but the kids are just not getting it. Mm-hmm. And it's because of this.
Right. We had one that had, she reached out to me and said, he made a 27 on his test. And we've talked about this, it was the compass rose, and we've talked about this for 2 weeks, and I'm like, let me think. Okay, so when I just told her everything.
All you had to do is look at Daddy's tattoos right there. There's north and there's south. The compass rose right there. You see that? Mm-hmm.
Anyways. So basically what what I told her is I just told her everything that, that we have struggled with. This particular child has been tested. He has dyslexia. So, I mean, part of it has to do with that. So we had to go over it at home, and it had to be a literal, like, we had to he had to do it himself. If he doesn't do it himself, it doesn't happen. He doesn't learn it.
He doesn't process what he's looking at.
You can sit there and go, this is north and south, west and east, that you can sit there and tell him that.
And then you can ask him, what is this? And he'll be like, I don't know.
What'd I just say? I don't know.
So the reason we've gotten to this point is because before we started reaching out and try to learn, hey, what's going on? Because initially you think, oh, he's just lazy. He just don't want to do his schoolwork.
Right.
He just hates school. But when it's all the time like that, and you're trying, you feel like you're beating your head against the wall. I'm sure you've heard that saying before. I feel like I'm beating my head against the wall. Well, we figured it has to be something else going on there.
Right.
So it's very, very frustrating. But then, obviously, once you learn what's going on, you can attack it from different angles. And the great thing about it is then you as parents are not as frustrated as we once were, because you just don't understand what's going on and why he's not listening.
Right.
When I'm sitting here telling him and he just don't get it.
Listening is probably our biggest struggle in our house with kids is them not listening. And I think that for most parents, this is an issue. Number 2 is difficulty writing information down. So this comes more into school. So sometimes they don't write down their assignments, or when they do write it down, like the other day we had one that came home and I'm like, what's the cards you're supposed to study? He was like, I don't know. I said, well, did you not think about when you were writing in your assignment book, like what that meant? Nope. Didn't ever cross his mind. He just wrote what was on the board. And then there's also the problem with kids who actually can't. So one of our kids actually can't transcribe what's on the board.
And these are 2 different kids. These are actually both boys.
Right. Yeah.
So one of them, the first one Haley was talking about, he'll write something down, not even thinking about what he's writing down, or he may not even write it down, nothing at all. The other one, which is a separate situation, he'll write it down, but he can't write it down correctly. Like he can't write down, he can look at it on the board and he can't copy from the board to his paper.
Right.
It's all jumbled up or messed up, letters backwards.
Well, which part of that with him, he does have a little bit of a learning disability too, and they're actually testing him for dyslexia as well. But also, that is a processing issue of not being able to transcribe what you see.
Right.
So the other thing, as far as writing down information, you're looking at tests. So with kids who have a hard time writing down a lot of information, so these kids have a hard time finishing tasks. So when you give them like a test, they have a hard time finishing it, or or putting all the information they want. They skip things. Because they're not really looking, they're not able to see and finish that task.
Right.
So number 3 is difficulty with reading comprehension.
And we definitely have that.
Yeah. So with reading comprehension, here's our problem with processing speeds. Is a lot of times, especially in school, I know when you homeschool, sometimes you can work around these problems, but you still want to end school at some point, know. But with school, the problems we have is when you have time tests, or this is our time to read and you need to get this done and understand it.
Right.
So if you have a hard time reading and comprehending what you read, and you have to read something over and over and over, then the problem becomes, how do you do that if you are not able to understand it and process it within that a period of time. So there's a frustration. And then also with large assignments. And that is a problem. You know, when you have a large assignment, kids get overwhelmed, they get lost in the middle, and because they haven't processed the beginning and they have a hard time dividing it out.
Right.
So, all right.
And then one of ours, actually, it's our oldest, because at this point he's really, well, Justin can read a little bit, but Justin's not as fluent as Jaden is. But he reads almost every night. We'll tell him, hey, go read a book. Go pick out a book out of the library and go that library right there, and read a book. And I didn't like the way I did that. So with Jaden, we'll tell him almost every night to read a book, a small book, and he'll read it. And if it's not one that he hasn't read a lot, it's like skimming. He gets some of the high points, but he can't really put the story together.
Right.
Unless he's read it over and over and over and over, and he begins to understand the story. But that takes a long time. Right. And these are simple stories. These are simple books, and so that him being able to process what he reads, and that's actually been a problem for even some adults. They can read and they don't really understand what they're reading, or they can't process what they're reading. It took me a long time to begin to understand what I was reading instead of just trying to read through it.
Right.
And it was, it's a processing disorder.
Well, and sometimes too with kids, they get to the point where they really want to just get done with it.
Right.
So that's where I think Jaden comes into play. I think he speed reads through it, and he can tell you what some of the characters even say, but he can't really tell you what it was about. So that's kind of what we've been working on.
And it's hard. That's one of the things that's extremely difficult is because kids they can be lazy, especially when it comes to schoolwork, that they don't want to do. And to have a processing issue on top of them being lazy and not wanting to do it, trying to figure out which one's which and where does one stop and one begin. That's been a difficult process for us I think we're finally getting through.
Right. And some of it too is, is us trying to motivate our kids, because it's like we tell them all the time, I want you to be a success. I want you to do well. So we're not trying to be mean here. We're not trying to make you do something that we don't think you can do. We know you can do this, so you're trying to inspire them to be successful because this is what you want for them. And, with him being in the 3rd grade, it's time for him to understand some of the stuff that he reads. And so, sometimes you have to tell your kids, hey, you may have to read things a couple of times.
Right.
Everyone else may not have to, and you may have to be that one that does it. But
that's okay.
Yeah, that's okay. It's okay to be that person that doesn't get everything immediately the first time.
And that was me. Growing up, it took me forever. I told Haley there was times I may have been in the 5th or 6th grade, and I heard the months of the year a lot. I knew what the months of the year were, but I never put them in order. And I remember just one night laying in bed, I started saying them and I put them in order, and I was in the 5th or 6th grade. It was crazy, and I was like, oh, that's how that goes. So it was I dealt with that, having to do things over and over and over, and it took me a long time to begin to understand things. Unless it was math, I always understood math pretty well. But yeah, so with our kids, it's a very similar situation to where with a couple of them, they have to hear things over and over and over, and it takes a long time for them to actually get it. And that's okay, as long as you keep trying.
Right. We
expect, and I think this is a failure on a lot of parents. We're going through some times right now that has a lot to do with parenting, a while back. And I think one of the failures as parents is we don't expect our kids to be able to do things that they're capable of doing.
Right.
We have a tendency to, like the other night, we were pushing Jaden to get his schoolwork done and to push through it, and he got frustrated and he started crying, and I think for most people they would say, okay, just take a break. But we've done the take a break thing before, and it doesn't work for him. He gets completely off track. He doesn't come back. So what we made him do, because we believe that kids are capable of doing more than what most people expect of them, sit there, quit crying, get through it, do what you have to do to get through what you're having to get through, and move forward. And after we told him that you're not getting down, You're going to do this. He quit crying, and then he just started doing his schoolwork again. But I think...
And he actually did it pretty quickly after that.
Yeah.
He realized that he was not going to get away with, okay, I'm not going to cry, and then mom's going to let me go play.
Right.
You know.
So
that was the frustration.
Yeah, and I say that just to be aware of that. Not to push your kids all the time past their limits. I'm not saying, but if you understand the limits of your kids, you can push them even if it's a little uncomfortable for them, because they can accomplish so much more than what most parents are expecting out of them.
Right. So we've had somewhat of this problem with our oldest child, as far as, you know, things being due and all that. That's what actually inspired me to read this book, because I'm sitting here going, she should, you know, be able to do this.
Right.
And she can. She's very smart.
She was the one that, the reason I talk about you need to expect more out of your kids, because I was actually thinking about this as I was talking about. I was thinking about Zoe at 2 years old, getting up in the middle of the night, and you probably heard this story 100 times, getting up in the middle of the night, climbing on top of the countertops, getting popcorn out of the shelf, opening the microwave, putting it in there, and cooking popcorn at 2 years old.
Well, she actually incinerated it, but yeah.
Yeah, but the point is that we didn't necessarily expect that out of her, but she was capable at 2 years old to do that. Now, was it safe? No, it wasn't super safe. It was in the middle of the night.
Yeah,
but I'm just saying that.
Put a little alarm on her door.
But what I'm saying is that they're capable,
Right.
and if you expect enough out of them, they're capable of achieving that.
Well, and then, you know, she had to learn what she was capable of. And so sometimes kids do limit themselves, and we allow them to limit themselves. And you really need, this is where you know your child and you know what they're capable of. So it was kind of interesting because she has struggled in certain areas with deadlines. This is a big thing for her. And as far as that daily grind of getting your schoolwork done. So she actually joined the cross-country team this year. And so it was really interesting because she made a very interesting comment to me. She said one time recently, she said, I didn't realize what I was capable of. She said, I had no idea that I could make myself do what I've done. And she said, and then I go back and I do it again and I keep getting better at it because I'm pushing myself. And she said, I almost quit because I didn't want to push myself, but I made myself do it. And I said, that's exactly right. You know, this is exactly what I'm trying to get across to her. If you push yourself, you are capable of doing more, but you have to push yourself. So you're teaching your children how to push themselves.
Right. And it's uncomfortable. When you push yourself past your limits, the reason you have those limits is because those limits are comfortable.
Yeah.
When you push yourself past the limits, it's uncomfortable. It physically hurts sometimes. But
Right.
You're never going to grow past that limit that you've set before yourself unless you go through a little bit of pain.
Right. Well, and part of it with our older girls, and Danny points this out a lot, is they set their limits sometimes really low. Especially as teenagers, they do get kind of this lazy, you know.
Well, it's easy to sit on the couch all day and look at your phone.
And Danny's like, Danny always says that. Get off your phone, get your stuff done. You know, that's a big thing. You know, quit watching TV. And I mean, you know, there are days, and I sometimes I give them those days because I think, you know, they probably are exhausted from their week. But
and there's a time for that, but It's not all the time.
Right. And so that's what we're doing, is we're kind of pushing them to move past that. All right. So moving forward, one of the number 4 is difficulty staying on task. This is
kind of like us
thing.
with this podcast.
No, we're staying on task. We're doing good. Difficulty staying on task. So with your kids, so one of the things that you can do, you just give them too much information and they just can't, like if I say, boys, I want you to go upstairs and clean your room. That is overwhelming to them sometimes, especially the two littles. Jackson and Colton will go and destroy their room. Everything's out of everything, and they are having to, we've got games all over the room. I don't even know when they do all this. I mean, you know, so anyways, they're so overwhelmed by their task that they can't get it done. And the same can be true of homework. If the directions are too complex, if you're giving information too quickly. One thing I've learned with our kids is that I can't give them too much. Like sometimes you can't tell them, hey, go get this, 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 and this, and bring them back downstairs. You have to say, hey, go get your underwear and your pajamas and bring them downstairs. Okay. Now we're going to do this, you know, so you can't just say, hey, we're going to go get your clothes. You need to take a bath. You need to wash your hair, you know, because
when you get out of the bath, go make your bed, go fold your clothes, go put up your clothes. It'll never get done.
It's not, because they're not even going to remember it. What they hear is usually the first and last and maybe something in the middle.
Or they hear, Y'all, most of you guys are probably old enough to know, like, the Peanuts gang and how their parents talk was wah, 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 wah. That's more than likely what they're hearing.
Right, well, probably so. So number 5 is difficulty retrieving information from your long-term memory. And so there's things that your kids should know. And then sometimes the way that they have stored the information, they have a hard time retrieving it. So like their multiplication tables, maybe that they learned several years before. Maybe they're having problems with them because they haven't used them. And it's all about those pathways in the brain too. So that can be a processing issue. And then difficulty finishing tasks in a allotted period of time, which that is a big one with processing disorders. And I think we've kind of touched on that a little bit. But giving these timed tests, so kids with processing disorders completely buckle down sometimes during timed tests. And what we're trying to figure out with these, because Zoe's always struggled with that. Even I remember in 5th grade, I remember Miss Darnell saying, when I give her a test to do, she kind of goes over a little bit. And I said, she's always done that. But then it comes to the point when you get to middle school, when that becomes a problem,
right.
So, there are we're going to give you some suggestions about that, about periods of time, because some kids are capable of doing things in a period of time and you have to continue to push them. And it is about repetition, but some kids, sometimes time limits have to be taken down. So you have to figure out your child and what they're capable of, basically.
I told her, I said, just mark C.
That's not a good idea. Not a good idea. But, that is something that she, just spitting out that information, she's gotten a lot better at it because we have pushed her to do what we think she's capable of. And some of that with her is how well she knows the information as well. So sometimes she will come home and say, well, I knew this information, but the test didn't reflect what I knew. Right. And sometimes that's true, and sometimes she just didn't learn the right information. So that's what we're trying to get through. And number 7, the last one, is difficulty getting started on a project. So I think we've all suffered with this a little bit. We call it procrastination, but this is actually a sign of processing disorder.
Well, I'm a little different. I love starting new projects. I love starting new things.
It's the finishing the task.
For me, it's the finishing the task. I struggle with finishing the task, but I love to start.
So for me, a lot of times it is the finishing the task. I have like 10 books right now that have bookmarks in the middle because I started them, but I didn't. Well, no, that's finishing a task too, isn't it? There you go. So a great example of this is the kids starting homework. So, you have to have a time when they're going to start, because they're not going to choose to say, hey, let me go ahead and do my homework right now.
Hey, Mom, I need to finish up my homework.
Yeah.
Before I go outside and play. Difficulty
getting started. And sometimes it's just your kids trying to struggle with how to get started. Like, what is it that I need to do? What do I need to get together in order to start this project?
Right.
And so that can be a processing issue that they're trying to work out ways. And so the more they put it off, the harder it is to get started.
And one of the things that I find, even with my own life, is that I do enjoy starting projects or starting things, but I have noticed that if the project seems at the beginning to be overwhelming, I don't want to start it. And I think that's also true. Actually, I know that's also true for the kids, is that if they're looking at something that feels overwhelming to them, they're not going to want to start it or do it. So one of the things that we can do, or that you can do, is kind of start in the way you eat an elephant is one bite at a time. So you just start off in little bites, and you don't give them the whole project. It's okay, let's just get through the reading part. All right, let's read this. And then after they've read it and comprehended it, then we can move on and say, okay, well, the next thing, let's talk about what we've read.
Yeah.
Instead of
our characters. Yeah.
Right. Instead of sitting down and saying, okay, we got to read this, talk about what we read, take the test. Instead of going through all that, it's overwhelming, and they're like, from the beginning, they're like, whoa, it's too much to process. Mm-hmm. So one of the things you can do is just kind of take it in bite-sized pieces.
Right. So basically what we've done is we've introduced a lot of the issues just to kind of, so that you can kind of think about your children, who fits into this category and which one am I struggling with. Our next episode, we're going to talk about strategies to deal with these problems. So we've given you some strategies as we've gone along and things that we have done, but we're going to go a little more in depth to our basic strategies on how to deal with processing disorders so that we can help our children to be a success and to live their lives without as much frustration and live your life without as much frustration.
That's right. Hey guys, thanks for listening and thanks for being a part of our community. We would love for you to, if you like this content and you like this video, to hit the like button, to subscribe. Go check out our GuthrieFamily.blog webpage. It's GuthrieFamily.blog, and we blog about what we talked about on the videos. And at the bottom of most of those pages, you can sign up to become a member, and we would love for you to do that. So do that, and we'll see you next time.